In a sweat-soaked boardroom, a billion-dollar system is collapsing by the second. The tech geniuses are helpless. CEO. Natalie Voss, trembling, turns to the last man she never dared to trust, the maintenance worker who always leaves on time to pick up his kid. But when Liam Carter steps up to the keyboard, his hands don't shake. Because beneath that faded uniform lies a secret powerful enough to shake an empire. This is the story of the most ordinary father and the most extraordinary secret. Stay until the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the basement maintenance corridor hummed with the same tired frequency they had for the past 3 years. Liam Carter moved through them like a man who had learned not to be noticed, his gray uniform blending into the concrete walls, his footsteps barely making a sound on the industrial flooring. He carried his toolbox in one hand, the handle worn smooth from daily use, and checked his phone with the other, 4:47 p.m. 13 minutes to finish this last repair and get to Sophie's daycare before the late fee kicked in. "Hey, Carter?" Liam didn't look up. He knew that voice, Derek Morris, one of the senior engineers who liked to remind everyone that maintenance workers belonged in the basement, not anywhere near the executive floors. "Yeah?" Liam kept walking. "Elevator on 12 is acting up again. You fixed it last week, didn't you?" Derek's tone carried that edge of accusation that came so naturally to him. "Maybe try doing it right this time?" Liam stopped, turned slowly. Derek stood with 2 other engineers, all of them in their crisp button-downs and lanyards that granted access to floors Liam would never see. "I replaced the control board. If it's acting up, someone tampered with it." "Right, because someone has nothing better to do than mess with elevators." Derek smirked at his colleagues. "Just handle it, okay? Some of us have real work to do." Liam watched them walk away, their laughter echoing down the corridor. He could have said more, could have explained that the replacement board he'd installed last week was a superior model, that the original failure had been caused by a voltage spike in the building's power grid, that he'd actually prevented 3 other elevator banks from experiencing the same issue. But he'd learned years ago that explaining only made him more visible, and visibility was the last thing he needed. 4:48 p.m. He headed for the stairs. Quantum Dynamics Corporation occupied 43 floors of steel and glass in downtown Seattle. The company had revolutionized cloud computing infrastructure 5 years ago with a proprietary system architecture that could handle data loads other platforms couldn't touch. Their stock had tripled. Fortune 500 companies paid premium rates for access. And Liam Carter, architect of none of it according to every record that mattered, made $19 an hour keeping the toilets working and the lights on. He took the basement stairs 2 at a time, his toolbox rattling. The executive floors existed in an entirely different universe, one with natural light, ergonomic furniture, and coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through a gym sock. He'd been up there exactly twice in 3 years, both times to fix heating vents that the regular HVAC guys couldn't figure out. Both times he'd worked quickly, kept his head down, and left before anyone could wonder why a maintenance worker seemed to understand the building's environmental control algorithms better than the specialists. The stairwell door to the 12th floor swung open just as he reached the landing. A woman in her early 30s stepped through, phone pressed to her ear, her other hand juggling a leather portfolio and a coffee cup that was definitely about to spill. "I don't care what the board thinks about timeline," she was saying, her voice sharp and controlled. "The Beijing office needs the update pushed by Friday, or we're looking at breach of contract penalties that'll make last quarter look like..." The coffee cup tipped. Liam's hand shot out, caught it before the contents could hit the floor. The woman stopped mid-sentence, stared at him. "Hold on, Richard." She lowered the phone. "Thank you." Liam handed her the cup, careful not to meet her eyes for too long. He knew who she was. Everyone in the building knew. Natalie Voss, CEO, the woman who'd turned a promising startup into a tech giant through sheer force of will and what some called ruthless ambition. She was younger than most executives at her level, sharper than all of them, and had a reputation for asking questions that made experienced engineers sweat. "No problem." He moved past her toward the elevator bank. "Your maintenance?" She was still watching him. "Yes, ma'am." "The elevator's been stalling between floors. It happened 3 times this morning." Liam set down his toolbox, pressed the call button, The indicator showed the car was on 27, descending. I'll take a look. Natalie returned to her phone call, but she didn't leave. Richard, I'm telling you, the architecture can handle the load increase. We stress tested the system at 140% capacity. Because I read the original design specifications, that's how I know. The elevator arrived. The doors opened with a slight shudder that most people wouldn't notice. Liam noticed. He stepped inside, pressed the button for the mechanical room on 14, and felt the momentary hesitation in the motor's engagement. The car rose smoothly enough, but there was a micro delay in the controller's response time. Not the control board he'd replaced. Something else. Natalie stepped in beside him, still on her call. No, we're not pushing the timeline back. Find a way to make it work. She ended the call, dropped the phone into her jacket pocket. You fixed this elevator last week. Yes, ma'am. And now it's broken again. Not broken, different issue. The car slowed as it approached 14, and there it was again. That fractional hesitation, like the system was checking something twice before committing to the action. Different how? The doors opened. Liam picked up his toolbox. The control board I replaced handles the car's movement. This is a response delay in the safety override system. Someone probably updated the building's central monitoring software without adjusting the elevator protocol parameters. Natalie's expression shifted slightly. You can tell that from riding in it once? Yes, ma'am. How long will it take you to fix? Liam checked his phone. 4:51 p.m. 20 minutes to diagnose properly, another 10 to adjust the parameters. But I need to leave by 5. It's 4:51. I know. For a moment, Natalie just looked at him, and Liam felt that uncomfortable prickle of being seen, really seen, by someone who made a living reading people. Then she nodded. Fix what you can in 8 minutes. If it's not done, we'll schedule it for tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. She walked away toward the executive suite, and Liam released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He found the access panel for the elevator control junction, pulled out his tablet, a battered 7-year-old model that he'd modified himself to interface with the building's systems, and connected to the diagnostic port. The code scrolled across the screen. There it was. Someone from the IT department had pushed a security update to the building management system 3 days ago. Standard procedure, except they'd changed the handshake protocol between the central monitoring hub and the elevator controllers. Now, every time an elevator car initiated movement, the safety system was checking authorization twice because the protocol versions didn't match. Not dangerous, just annoying. And completely predictable if you understood how the building's original network architecture had been designed. Liam pulled up the parameter file, adjusted the version compatibility flag, and pushed the update. The whole process took 4 minutes. He tested the elevator twice, smooth as butter now, and was packing up his tools when his phone buzzed. Sophie's daycare. His stomach dropped. Mr. Carter? Hi, it's Jenny from Bright Horizons. I'm calling because pickup time is in 4 minutes, and we haven't heard from you. I'm on my way. I'll be there by 5:05. Our policy is that late pickup after 5:15 incurs a $15 fee per... I know. I'll be there. He ended the call, grabbed his toolbox, and ran for the stairs. The traffic on Madison Street was worse than usual. Liam gripped the steering wheel of his 12-year-old Honda Civic and watched the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. 5:02. 5:03. The daycare was 7 blocks away. He could make it if the next 2 lights stayed green. They didn't. 5:06. He pulled into the daycare parking lot, killed the engine, and jogged to the entrance. Through the window, he could see Sophie sitting in the reading corner, her blonde hair falling forward as she looked at a picture book. She was the only kid left. Jenny, the assistant director, stood nearby with that patient, slightly judgmental expression that Liam had come to recognize as the universal look of childcare workers dealing with a parent who was cutting it close. He pushed through the door. I'm sorry. Work ran over. It's 5:07, Mr. Carter. I know, I'm sorry. Sophie looked up and her whole face transformed. Daddy! She ran to him and Liam scooped her up, felt her small arms wrap around his neck. This was the moment that made the $19 an hour, the basement corridors, the Derek Morrises of the world worth it every single time. Hi, Bug. Good day? We made volcanoes with baking soda. Mine exploded the biggest. Biggest, huh? That's my girl. Jenny cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, this is the third time this month you've arrived after 5. I know. It won't happen again. If it does, we'll have to discuss whether Bright Horizons is the right fit for your schedule. Liam set Sophie down, took her hand. Understood. Thank you. They walked to the car together, Sophie chattering about volcanoes and her friend Maya, who'd spilled juice on her dress, and the new fish in the classroom tank, who she'd named Sparkles. Liam listened to every word, responded to every question, and didn't let himself think about the fact that discussing fit was daycare speak for, "We'll kick your kid out if you can't pick her up on time." "Can we get McDonald's?" Sophie asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. "Not tonight. I'm making spaghetti." "With the good sauce?" "With the good sauce." "And garlic bread?" "What kind of monster do you think I am?" Sophie giggled, and Liam felt some of the tension ease out of his shoulders. Their apartment was a 30-minute drive in the opposite direction of quantum dynamics, which meant that mornings required military precision and evenings offered no buffer for unexpected delays. Other parents at the daycare talked about nannies, flexible work-from-home schedules, partners who could split pickup duty. Liam had none of those things. He had a 6-year-old daughter, a job that paid enough to keep them housed and fed, and a carefully constructed life designed to be stable, predictable, and safe. That was enough. It had to be enough. Their apartment was a 2-bedroom unit in a complex that had been built in the 70s and hadn't been updated much since. The carpet was worn, the kitchen was tiny, and the bathroom faucet dripped no matter how many times Liam replaced the washers. But the neighborhood was safe, the school district was decent, and the rent was manageable. Sophie's room had walls painted pale yellow. Liam had done it himself, and shelves filled with books and stuffed animals. His room had a bed, a dresser, and a desk where he worked sometimes after she went to sleep. "Go wash your hands," Liam said as they walked in. "I'll start dinner." Sophie dropped her backpack by the door and ran for the bathroom. Liam hung up his jacket, set his toolbox in the hallway closet, and tried not to think about the fact that he smelled like industrial cleaner and machine oil. He'd shower after Sophie went to bed. The spaghetti was a simple recipe he'd perfected over the years. Ground beef, canned tomatoes, garlic, basil, a splash of red wine that he kept specifically for cooking. The garlic bread was frozen, but he added butter and parmesan to make it better. Sophie helped him tear lettuce for salad, standing on a step stool at the counter, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Daddy, why do you always have to work late?" The question hit him in the chest. "I don't always work late. But sometimes." "Sometimes. Yeah. Maya's mom picks her up at 3. Maya's mom has a different job than me." "What's your job?" Liam stirred the sauce. "I fix things." "Like what?" "Elevators, lights, air conditioning, whatever breaks." "Is that hard?" "Sometimes." Sophie pulled apart another piece of lettuce. "I don't want you to work late anymore." "I'll try not to, Bug, I promise." They ate dinner at the small table in the living room, Sophie telling him more about her day, Liam asking questions and filing away the information that mattered. Maya was her best friend, volcanoes were the coolest thing in the world right now, and there was a field trip coming up to the aquarium that required a permission slip and $15. After dinner, Sophie had bath time, then story time, 2 chapters of a book about a girl detective and her talking dog, and then Liam tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Bug." "Love you too, Daddy." He turned off the light, left her door cracked open, and walked back to the living room. The apartment was quiet. He cleaned up the kitchen, checked his email on his phone, and found a message from Derek Morris sent to the entire maintenance department. Reminder: executive floor maintenance requires authorization from facilities management before any work is performed. This includes routine repairs. No exceptions. Liam deleted the email. Derek had been pushing this new policy for months, ever since Liam had fixed a server room cooling issue that the outside contractors hadn't been able to solve. It was petty territorial nonsense, but arguing would only make things worse. Better to stay invisible. He opened his laptop, another old machine that he'd upgraded piece by piece over the years, and pulled up the personal project he'd been working on for the past 6 months. It was a diagnostic tool, something that could scan a building's integrated systems and identify potential failure points before they became problems. Not for quantum dynamics. Not for anyone in particular. Just something to keep his mind sharp. The code was elegant, efficient, built on principles he'd learned a long time ago in a different life. He worked on it for an hour, adding a new module that could predict HVAC failures based on usage patterns and environmental data. It was good work, satisfying in a way that replacing elevator control boards wasn't. At 10:30, he closed the laptop, took a shower, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be the same as today. Wake up at 5:45, get Sophie ready for school, drop her off at 7:15, drive to quantum dynamics, spend 8 hours being invisible, pick Sophie up, make dinner, do bedtime, work on his project for an hour, sleep, repeat. It was a good life, a stable life, a safe life. He told himself that enough times that he almost believed it. The next morning, Liam was replacing a ballast in a conference room on floor 8 when his radio crackled. "Carter, you there?" He recognized the voice. Gary Chen, the facilities manager, one of the few people at Quantum Dynamics who treated maintenance workers like humans. "Yeah, I'm here. Need you on 42, CEO's office. Something with the environmental controls." Liam checked his watch. 9:15 a.m. "What's the issue?" "Temperature's fluctuating." It already looked at it, said it's not the system's software. Figure it's gotta be hardware. "I'll head up." The 42nd floor was another world. Liam stepped out of the elevator into a reception area with polished marble floors, modern art on the walls, and a security desk where he had to sign in and get a visitor badge, even though he worked in the building. The receptionist, a young guy with perfect hair and a suit that probably cost more than Liam's monthly rent, looked at him like he was trying to figure out why a janitor was there. "Environmental controls," Liam said. "Facilities sent me." "Oh, right. Ms. Voss's office is down the hall, last door on the left." Liam followed the directions, toolbox in hand, and tried not to notice the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The entire city spread out below, Puget Sound in the distance, mountains on the horizon. This was what success looked like. This was what happened when you reached the top. He'd been here once before. Different circumstances, different life. Natalie Voss's office was exactly what he expected. Massive desk, designer furniture, one wall completely dominated by screens showing real-time data from quantum dynamic systems around the world. The temperature in the room was a good 5 degrees warmer than the hallway, and Natalie herself sat at her desk in a blazer, looking frustrated and slightly flushed. Finally, she looked up as he entered. "It's been like this since 8 o'clock. It said they couldn't find anything wrong." "It wouldn't. This isn't a software issue." Liam set down his toolbox, pulled out his tablet. "Mind if I check your environmental control panel?" "Whatever you need to do." The panel was behind a decorative wall screen. Liam moved it aside, opened the access port, and connected his tablet. The data that came up made him pause. The temperature controls for this office were set to maintain 68 degrees, but the actual temperature sensor was reading 74. The system was responding correctly to what it was reading, pumping more cool air, but the sensor itself was malfunctioning, and not randomly. The readings showed a pattern, temperature spikes that correlated exactly with high processing periods on the servers in the room. Liam glanced at Natalie's desk. 3 monitors, a laptop, and what looked like a direct neural interface terminal, the kind used for immersive coding or system architecture work. All of it generating heat, all of it right next to the temperature sensor. "The sensor placement is wrong," Liam said. Natalie looked up. "What?" "Whoever installed your office equipment put it too close to the environmental sensor. The system thinks the room is hotter than it is because it's reading the heat from your computers, so it's overcorrecting." "Can you fix it?" "I can move the sensor. It'll take about 20 minutes. He checked his watch, 9:32. He could do this and still make it to his next repair with time to spare. "Do it." Liam worked quickly, relocating the sensor to the opposite wall where it wouldn't be affected by equipment heat. While he worked, Natalie continued typing, occasionally speaking into the phone, running what looked like a company without pause. But he could feel her attention on him intermittently, the weight of her observation. "You're the one who fixed the elevator yesterday," she said at one point. "Yes, ma'am." "In 8 minutes. Didn't take the full time." "It's been working on my temperature issue for 2 days." Liam didn't respond. There wasn't a good answer that didn't sound either arrogant or like he was throwing the IT department under the bus. "What's your background?" Natalie asked. "Maintenance. Building systems, mostly. Before that, Liam's hands paused on the sensor mount just for a fraction of a second. Then he continued working. Before that, I did some electrical work. Construction. You have formal training? Some. Some meaning what? Trade school? Engineering degree? Trade school. The lie came easily, worn smooth from 3 years of use. Natalie was quiet for a moment. That's interesting. What is? The way you diagnosed the temperature issue. You looked at the system data and immediately identified the correlation between processing load and sensor readings. That's not trade school thinking. That's systems architecture thinking. Liam finished mounting the sensor, closed the access panel. Just logic. Right, logic. Natalie leaned back in her chair, studying him. What's your name? Liam Carter. How long have you worked here, Liam? 3 years? And you're happy doing maintenance? The question caught him off guard. Happy wasn't a word that fit. Satisfied? Safe? Stable? Those worked better. It's a good job. That's not what I asked. Liam packed up his tools, disconnected his tablet. Temperature should stabilize in the next few minutes. If it doesn't, call facilities and they'll send someone else. Why would I call someone else when you clearly know what you're doing? Because I need to leave at 5 p.m. every day. Why? Personal reasons. Everyone has personal reasons. Most people are willing to adjust when necessary. Liam picked up his toolbox, met her eyes directly for the first time. I'm not most people. Is there anything else you need, Ms. Voss? For a long moment, Natalie just looked at him, and Liam had the uncomfortable sense that she was filing him away in some mental database, marking him as an anomaly worth investigating later. Then she shook her head. No, thank you for fixing it. You're welcome. He left the office, returned his visitor badge, and took the elevator back down to the basement. His heart was beating harder than it should have been. It was just a simple repair job, just a conversation. Nothing to worry about. Except he'd felt something shift in that office, some recognition in Natalie Voss's eyes that went beyond simple curiosity about a competent maintenance worker. She'd seen something. Maybe not enough to connect the dots, but enough to start asking questions. And questions were dangerous. For the next week, Liam kept his head down and did his work. He replaced a faulty GFCI outlet in the cafeteria, fixed a water leak in a third-floor bathroom, installed new LED fixtures in the parking garage. All routine tasks, all completed efficiently, all well below the notice threshold of anyone who mattered. But twice he saw Natalie Voss in the building. Once in the lobby, once getting into an elevator on floor 20. And both times she looked directly at him, held eye contact for just a second too long. Not hostile, not friendly, just aware. On Friday afternoon, Derek Morris cornered him in the maintenance shop. Heard you did some work in the CEO's office, Derek said. Liam was restocking his toolbox, organizing screws and wire nuts into their proper compartments. Facilities sent me. Temperature sensor. Right. And I heard you had a nice long conversation with her. I fixed the problem. She asked some questions. That's it. See, here's the thing, Carter. Derek leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. You're maintenance. That means you fix things and keep your mouth shut. You don't get chatty with executives. You don't offer opinions on system architecture. You definitely don't go making yourself noticeable. Liam continued organizing his tools. Noted. I'm serious. You're good at your job, I'll give you that. But you need to stay in your lane, otherwise people start getting ideas. What kind of ideas? That maybe you're overqualified for what you're doing, that maybe there's a reason you're working maintenance instead of something that matches your skill level. And when people get those ideas, they start asking questions. Derek pushed off the workbench. Just friendly advice. Take it however you want. He left, and Liam stood there for a moment, staring at the rows of organized tools. Derek was right, even if he was an asshole about it. Being noticed was dangerous. Being questioned was worse. He'd worked too hard, given up too much to let curiosity from a CEO, no matter how sharp she was, threaten the stable life he'd built for Sophie. At 4:53, he clocked out, drove to the daycare, and picked up his daughter with 3 minutes to spare. Daddy, can Katie come over tomorrow? Sophie asked on the drive home. Who's Katie? From my class. We're both going to be astronauts when we grow up. Astronauts, huh? That's a tough job. I know, that's why I need to practice. Can she come over? Liam thought about their small apartment, the worn furniture, the fact that he'd need to clean and buy snacks and be on for another parent picking up their kid. Then he looked at Sophie's hopeful face in the rearview mirror. Sure, Bug, we'll make it work. Yes, Sophie pumped her fist. Katie's going to be so excited. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Liam sat at his desk working on his diagnostic tool. He'd added 3 new modules in the past week, including one that could predict network bottlenecks based on traffic patterns. The code was some of his best work, elegant and efficient, solving problems that most engineers wouldn't even recognize existed. He stared at the screen, at the lines of code that represented everything he used to be, everything he'd walked away from. Some days he missed it, the challenge, the creative problem-solving, the satisfaction of building something revolutionary. But then he thought about Sophie asleep in the next room, safe and happy and stable, and he knew he'd made the right choice. Some people were meant to change the world. Others were meant to pick up their kids on time. Liam saved his work, closed the laptop, and went to bed. Monday morning started with a broken HVAC unit on floor 15. Liam spent 3 hours diagnosing a compressor failure, called in an order for a replacement part, and was heading back to the basement when his radio crackled. Carter, Gary, need you in conference room C on 37. Some kind of tech failure. The engineers can't get the presentation system working. On my way. Conference room C was large enough to hold 50 people, with a wall of screens and a sophisticated AV system that integrated with the building's network infrastructure. When Liam arrived, he found 6 engineers clustered around the control panel, all of them looking frustrated, and Derek Morris standing off to the side with his arms crossed. What's the issue? Liam asked. One of the engineers, a woman named Sarah, looked up. We have a board presentation in 20 minutes and the system won't connect to the network. It already tried remotely, couldn't fix it. Derek said you might be able to help. Liam glanced at Derek, who was smirking slightly. This wasn't a friendly gesture. This was a test. Maybe even a trap. I'll take a look. He approached the control panel, pulled out his tablet connected to the diagnostic port. The system appeared functional. Power was good. All components showed active. But when he tried to initiate a network handshake, nothing happened. It was like the system existed in a bubble, completely isolated from the building's infrastructure. Liam pulled up the network configuration. There it was. Someone had changed the VLAN assignment for this conference room, moving it to a segment that wasn't routed to the main corporate network. Probably part of some security update. The fix would take 2 minutes if he had administrator access to the network infrastructure, which he didn't, because he was maintenance. It's a network configuration issue, Liam said. You need to call IT and have them reassign the VLAN. We did call IT, Sarah said. They said it would take at least an hour to get someone up here. I can talk you through it if someone has admin access. None of us do. Liam looked at the clock on the wall, 9:42. The board presentation started at 10 o'clock. He could fix this in 90 seconds if he had the access credentials. Without them, these engineers would have to move the entire presentation to a different room, reschedule, or cancel. Sorry, he said. Without admin access, there's nothing I can do. Derek stepped forward. Come on, Carter. I've seen you fix plenty of things that should have required IT support. You're telling me you can't handle this? It was absolutely a trap. Derek wanted him to admit he had capabilities beyond his job description, or wanted him to fail publicly, or maybe both. Either way, Liam wasn't taking the bait. I can diagnose the problem. I can't fix network configuration without proper authorization. Company policy. Right, company policy. Derek's smirk widened. Guess you're not as useful as everyone thinks. Liam packed up his tablet. I'll let Gary know you need IT up here ASAP. Good luck with your presentation. He left the conference room, took the elevator back down, and tried to ignore the feeling that he'd just failed some kind of test. But it didn't matter. He'd done the right thing. Staying invisible meant staying safe. That was the rule. At 4:58 p.m., he was washing his hands in the maintenance shop bathroom, getting ready to leave, when Gary called him on the radio. Carter, I need you to head back up to 42. Ms. Voss wants to see you. Liam's stomach tightened. What for? Didn't say. Just said to send you up before you leave. I need to leave at 5. I know, this'll just take a minute. Go. Liam checked his watch. 4:59. He could get to 42, have a brief conversation, and still make it to the daycare by 5:10 if traffic cooperated. It would be tight, but possible. He took the elevator up, signed in at the security desk, and walked to Natalie's office. She was standing at her window wall, looking out at the city, but turned when he knocked. "Liam, come in." He stayed in the doorway. "I need to leave in a few minutes." "This won't take long." She gestured to one of the chairs facing her desk. "Sit." "I'd rather stand." Natalie studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. I'll get to the point. I've been watching you." "Ma'am?" "Since you fixed my temperature issue. I've been curious, so I pulled your employment file." Liam's pulse kicked up. "Okay. It's thin. High school diploma, trade school certification in electrical systems, 3 years of maintenance work here. Before that, some construction jobs, gaps in the timeline. References that check out but don't tell me much." She walked closer. "You know what's interesting? The technical assessments you took when you were hired. You scored in the 99th percentile on system diagnostics. Your problem-solving metrics were off the charts. The hiring manager made a note that you were overqualified but insisted on a maintenance position. I needed a job. They had an opening." "Bullshit." The word hung in the air between them. Liam didn't respond. "I've run this company for 4 years," Natalie continued. "I've interviewed hundreds of engineers, worked with some of the best technical minds in the industry. And in all that time, I've never met anyone who thinks about systems the way you do. The temperature sensor issue. You identified a complex correlation in about 30 seconds. The elevator problem. You diagnosed a protocol mismatch from the feel of the car moving. These aren't maintenance worker skills, Liam. These are architect-level skills." "I fix things. That's my job." "Yes. But what did you do before you started fixing things?" Liam checked his watch. 5:03. "Ms. Voss, I appreciate your interest, but I really need to go. I'm offering you a job." That stopped him. "What?" "Senior Systems Engineer, direct report to the CTO. Salary commensurate with experience, which I'm betting is considerably more than what's in your file. You'd be working on critical infrastructure, solving problems that matter, using skills that are clearly wasted on replacing light fixtures." For a moment, Liam couldn't speak. The offer was everything he'd once wanted, the recognition he'd once craved. It was also impossible. "I can't." "Why not?" "I have a daughter. I need to pick her up every day at 5. A senior engineering position means late nights, weekend work, travel. I can't do that." "We can work around your schedule." "No, you can't. I've worked in senior engineering. I know what it requires. The answer is no." Natalie's expression shifted, frustration giving way to something closer to respect. "Then help me understand. Why would someone with your capabilities choose to do maintenance work?" "Because it lets me be a father." "That's it? You'd rather change light bulbs than build something that matters?" The question stung more than it should have. "What matters is making sure my daughter has a parent who's present. Everything else is secondary." "Even your own potential?" "Especially that." Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked back to her desk, pulled out a business card, and handed it to him. "If you change your mind, call me. The offer stands." Liam took the card without looking at it. "I won't change my mind. Can I go?" "Yes." He left the office, practically ran to the elevator, and made it to the daycare at 5:12. Jenny gave him that look again, the one that said this was becoming a pattern, but Sophie didn't care. She launched herself at him, and Liam picked her up and held on tight. "I had the best day, Daddy. We learned about fractions." "Fractions, huh? Those are tricky." "Not for me. I'm good at math." "Yeah, you are." They walked to the car together, Sophie chattering about fractions, and her friend who'd brought cookies for snack time and the book she wanted to read tonight. Liam listened to every word and tried not to think about Natalie Voss's offer, or the business card in his pocket, or the fact that someone had finally noticed him after 3 years of trying so hard to be invisible. When they got home, Sophie went to wash her hands and Liam pulled out the business card. It was simple, elegant. Natalie Voss, CEO, with a direct phone number and email. On the back, she'd written in neat handwriting, "You're wasting yourself. Think about it." Liam stared at those words for a long time. Then he dropped the card in the kitchen trash, covered it with coffee grounds, and went to start dinner. The business card stayed buried in the trash for exactly 3 days before Liam fished it out, wiped off the coffee grounds, and tucked it into his wallet behind Sophie's school photo. He told himself it was just in case, just a backup plan. He wasn't going to call, he wasn't going to change his mind, but having it there felt like keeping a door cracked open, even if he never planned to walk through it. Work continued in its predictable rhythm. Liam replaced a malfunctioning door lock on floor 6, fixed a flickering light in the parking structure, and recalibrated the climate control system in the West Wing server room. Gary gave him assignments, he completed them efficiently, and nobody bothered him. It was exactly what he needed. Except Derek Morris seemed determined to make sure it didn't last. On Thursday morning, Liam was reorganizing the maintenance supply closet, a task he actually enjoyed because it required logic and systems thinking, when Derek appeared in the doorway with a tablet in hand and that smile that never meant anything good. "Carter, got a special project for you." Liam continued stacking boxes of air filters. "What kind of project?" "Building management wants a full diagnostic on the fire suppression system. Every floor, every zone. Needs to be done by end of next week for the insurance inspection. That's a 2-person job minimum. Takes at least 40 hours. Yeah, well, Jenkins is out with the flu and Martinez is on vacation, so it's a you job now." Derek tapped his tablet. "I'm sending you the checklist. Each zone needs manual inspection, documentation, and a system test. No shortcuts." Liam turned to face him. "I can't work late. You know that." "Not my problem. Figure it out." Derek's smile widened. "Unless you want to tell Gary you can't handle the assignment, I'm sure we can find someone more flexible." The threat was clear. Refuse the impossible task and risk losing the job entirely. Accept it and fail, proving he wasn't reliable. Either way, Derek won. "I'll do it," Liam said. "Great. Let me know if you need help understanding any of the technical requirements." "I know fire suppression systems can be complicated for maintenance guys." Derek left, and Liam stood there holding a box of HEPA filters, doing the math in his head. 40 hours of work, 5 days to complete it. 8-hour workday that ended at 5 p.m. sharp. The numbers didn't work. Not even close. He could ask for overtime authorization, but that would mean staying late, missing pickups, paying daycare fees that would eat most of the extra pay. He could try to work faster, but fire suppression inspections required methodical attention to every component. Rushing meant missing problems that could get people killed. Or he could do what Derek clearly expected, fail, and give him ammunition to argue that Liam wasn't suited for anything beyond basic repairs. Liam pulled out his phone, stared at it for a moment, then called the daycare. "Bright Horizons, this is Jenny." "Hi, it's Liam Carter. I need to ask about your late pickup policy." There was a pause. "Mr. Carter, we've discussed this." "I know. I'm not asking to make it a habit. I have a work situation next week that might require me to pick up Sophie 15 or 20 minutes late a few times. I'm willing to pay the fees. I just need to know it's possible." Another pause, longer this time. "How many days are we talking about?" "Maybe 3. 4 at most." "Mr. Carter, our policy allows for occasional late pickups with advance notice. But if this becomes regular, it won't, I promise. This is a specific situation, 1 week only." "Then yes, that should be fine, but we close at 5:30 regardless of circumstances. If you're not here by then, we're required to call emergency services." "I understand. Thank you." He ended the call and immediately felt the weight of what he'd just agreed to. Sophie would be the last kid waiting, again. She'd see the other parents arriving on time, see the daycare workers checking the clock, feel that particular kind of small rejection that came from being left behind. Even if it was only for a few minutes, even if Liam was racing to get there. But what choice did he have? That evening, Sophie asked him why he looked tired, and Liam lied and said he was fine. They made tacos together, she was getting good at grating cheese, and after dinner they played her favorite card game, the one where she always found creative ways to bend the rules in her favor. Liam let her win twice, then beat her legitimately the 3rd time, and she demanded a rematch with the intensity of a gambler on a losing streak. "One more game, Daddy, please." "It's almost bedtime, Bug. 5 more minutes, that's all." Liam checked the clock. 8:32 p.m. She was supposed to be in bed by 8:30, but 5 minutes wouldn't hurt. "Okay, one more game." They played, and Sophie won with a combination that definitely violated at least 2 rules, and Liam tickled her until she was gasping with laughter. Then bath time, story time, tucking her in with her stuffed rabbit that she'd named Professor Whiskers for reasons she'd never fully explained. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Bug." "Are you happy?" The question hit him sideways. "What do you mean?" "At your job. Are you happy?" "I'm happy when I'm with you." "That's not what I asked." Liam sat on the edge of her bed, brushed hair away from her forehead. "My job is fine. It lets me take care of you. That's what matters. Maya's dad says you should love what you do." Maya's dad is right. But sometimes you do what you need to do, not what you love. Sophie frowned, processing this. That sounds sad. It's not sad. It's just how things work sometimes. When I grow up, I'm going to do what I love. Good. You should. What did you love? Before you did this job? Liam's throat tightened. Building things, solving problems that nobody else could solve. Why don't you do that anymore? Because I love you more. Sophie smiled, satisfied with that answer in a way that Liam wasn't. She hugged Professor Whiskers closer. I love you too, Daddy. Get some sleep, Bug. He turned off the light and closed the door, and stood in the hallway for a moment, feeling older than his 32 years. When had he become the kind of person who measured his life in daycare pickup times and overtime policies? When had good enough become his ceiling? He knew the answer. It had been the day Sophie was born, when her mother had looked at the tiny, screaming bundle of their daughter and said, I can't do this. 3 months later, she'd left. Not for another man, not for a better opportunity, just for the freedom to be someone other than a mother. The divorce papers had included full custody for Liam with no argument, no visitation requests. Just a clean break and a forwarding address in Portland that had stopped working after 6 months. Sophie didn't remember her. Liam had a single photo tucked in a drawer in case she ever asked, but she never had. As far as Sophie was concerned, family was just the 2 of them, and that was enough. It had to be enough. Monday morning, Liam started the fire suppression inspection on floor 40, working his way down. Each zone required checking the sprinkler heads, testing the pressure sensors, verifying the control panel responses, and documenting everything in excruciating detail. It was tedious work, important work, and absolutely impossible to complete in the time Derek had allotted. By noon, he'd finished 2 zones. He needed to average 4 per day. At 4:45, he was in the middle of Zone 3 when his radio crackled with Gary's voice. Carter, you there? Yeah. How's the inspection going? Slower than I'd like. Derek's writing me about progress reports, says he needs documentation by end of day. Liam looked at his tablet, at the half-completed checklist. Tell him it'll be ready tomorrow morning. He wants it today. Then he should have given me a realistic timeline. There was a pause. Look, man, I don't know what's going on between you and Derek, but he's looking for a reason to write you up. Don't give him one. I'll get him his documentation tomorrow. Liam ended the call, finished the zone inspection, and left at 4:58. He made it to the daycare at 5:11, paid the late fee, and tried not to see the look on Sophie's face when she was, once again, the last kid in the building. Sorry, Bug. Work ran over. It's okay. But her voice was small, and she didn't chatter on the drive home the way she usually did. That night after she was asleep, Liam worked on documentation until midnight, then got up at 5 a.m. to finish it before Sophie woke up. He submitted the report to Derek at 6:47 a.m., received no response, and continued the inspections. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday was worse. He found an actual problem in Zone 12, a pressure regulator that was failing and would have caused cascade failures during an emergency. Fixing it meant pulling in a specialist from the fire safety contractor, which meant paperwork and approvals, and 2 hours of his day gone while he supervised someone else's work. He picked up Sophie at 5:23. The late fee was now $25 because he'd crossed the 15-minute threshold. Late. Thursday, he made it by 5:09, a personal victory that felt pathetic even as he celebrated it internally. Friday, he hit Zone 26 and realized he was going to need the entire weekend to finish on time. He called Gary. I need weekend authorization for the inspection. Can't do it. Budget's already stretched this month. Then I need an extension on the deadline. Derek says no extensions. Insurance inspector is scheduled for Tuesday. Gary, this is impossible. You know that, right? This whole thing is designed to make me fail. I know. Gary's voice was quiet. But I can't help you. Derek's got seniority, and he's making this a chain of command issue. If you can't complete the assignment, he's recommending we move you to part-time with reduced responsibilities. Part-time doesn't pay enough for my rent. I know. Liam closed his eyes, stood in the stairwell of floor 19, and tried to think. Part-time meant finding another job, which meant interviews and schedule juggling and instability. It meant explaining to Sophie why things were changing, why money was tighter, why Daddy seemed more stressed. It meant the careful structure he'd built might collapse. Or he could work the weekend, pay for weekend daycare, which cost almost as much as he'd make in overtime. Rush through the inspections, maybe miss something, maybe put people at risk. Compromise the only thing he'd refused to compromise in 3 years, his reliability as a father. I'll figure it out, Liam said. I'm sorry, man. Liam ended the call and sat down on the stairs, head in his hands. He was so tired. Not just physically tired, though 3 nights of 4 hours sleep were catching up. Tired of being tested, of being pushed, of constantly having to prove he deserved the privilege of picking up his daughter on time. His phone buzzed. A text from the daycare. Reminder, field trip permission slips due Monday. $15 fee, right. The aquarium trip. Sophie had been talking about it all week, especially the jellyfish exhibit. Liam pulled out his wallet, looked at the bills inside. He had enough for the field trip or the late pickup fees, not both. And if he didn't finish the inspection, he might not have enough for either. Behind Sophie's photo, Natalie Voss's business card seemed to stare at him. He pulled it out. Read the handwritten message again. You're wasting yourself. Think about it. What if she was right? What if trying to stay invisible, trying to maintain this careful balance, was actually the thing that was going to break him? What if the safe choice was the one that led to failure? Liam stared at that card for a long time. Then he put it back in his wallet, grabbed his toolbox, and went back to work. Saturday morning, he dropped Sophie off at the weekend daycare program, a different facility with weekend rates that made him wince, and went to quantum dynamics. The building was mostly empty, just a few dedicated engineers working on projects and security guards making rounds. Liam had the fire suppression systems to himself. He worked straight through, documenting and testing with methodical precision. By 7 p.m., he'd cleared zones 26 through 32. His back ached, his eyes burned from staring at the tablet screen, and his phone showed 6 missed calls from the weekend daycare asking when he'd pick up Sophie. He made it there at 7:43 p.m. The fee was $35, and the staff member who checked Sophie out looked at him with barely concealed disapproval. Daddy, you said you'd be here at 6. I know, Bug. I'm sorry. I was the only one left. Again. I know. They got dinner at a drive-thru because Liam was too exhausted to cook. Sophie ate her chicken nuggets in silence, and when they got home, she went straight to bed without asking for a story. Liam stood in her doorway watching her pretend to be asleep and felt like the worst father in the world. Sunday, he finished zones 33 through 40. The last zone was, of course, on floor 42. Executive level, which meant signing in with security even on a weekend, getting a visitor badge, and working in an area where he absolutely did not belong. He was testing the final sprinkler head in the hallway outside the CEO's office when he heard footsteps behind him. Working weekends now? Liam turned. Natalie Voss stood there in jeans and a sweater, coffee cup in hand, looking nothing like the polished executive he'd seen before. She looked younger, more approachable, more human. Fire suppression inspection due tomorrow. On a Sunday? Limited time frame. Natalie leaned against the wall watching him work. How's your daughter? The question surprised him. She's fine. Where is she right now? Weekend daycare. Which costs you most of what you're making in overtime for this inspection, I'm guessing. Liam didn't answer. He finished testing the sprinkler head, documented the results, and started packing up his equipment. You know this is a setup, right? Natalie said. What? The inspection timeline. I saw the work order. Derek Morris requested it be assigned to you specifically, with an impossible deadline and no overtime authorization. He's trying to force you out. Why would you care? Because good people are hard to find, and you're very good at what you do. I'm just maintenance. Stop saying that. Natalie pushed off the wall, walked closer. I've been asking questions about you. Quiet questions through channels that don't lead back to me. You want to know what I found? Not particularly. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Before you showed up at Quantum Dynamics 3 years ago, Liam Carter basically didn't exist. No college records, no previous employment at any major company, no professional certifications. It's like you materialized out of thin air with a high school diploma and a trade school certificate. Liam's jaw tightened. People have gaps in their employment history. It happens. Not gaps like yours, and not with skills like yours. Natalie crossed her arms. I had IT pull the logs from every repair you've done in 3 years. You've never failed to solve a problem, never had to call in a specialist, never taken more than a day to fix something that should have taken a week. Your diagnostic accuracy is perfect. Perfect, Liam. That doesn't happen by accident. I should go. Who are you? The question hung between them, direct and unavoidable. Liam met her eyes and saw not accusation, but genuine curiosity. Maybe even concern. I'm a maintenance worker who needs to pick up his daughter. You're lying. Maybe, but it's my lie and I'm keeping it. He picked up his toolbox and walked toward the elevator. Natalie followed. The offer still stands. Senior systems engineer, your schedule, your terms. I'll even put it in writing that you can leave at 5 p.m. every day, no exceptions. You can't promise that. Senior engineers don't keep bankers' hours. I'm the CEO. I can promise whatever I want. The elevator arrived. Liam stepped inside and Natalie followed him in. They rode down in silence until she reached out and hit the emergency stop button. The car lurched to a halt between floors. What are you doing? Giving you a chance to be honest. Natalie faced him fully. I know you're protecting something. I don't know what it is, but I respect it. I do. But watching you destroy yourself to maintain a lie isn't something I'm comfortable with anymore. Then stop watching. Can't. You're too interesting. I'm really not. See, that's the thing. Natalie's voice softened. You genuinely believe that. You've convinced yourself that being a good father means being nothing else. That staying small keeps you safe. But all it's doing is making you miserable. I'm not miserable. Your daughter spent all day yesterday in daycare while you worked an impossible inspection that you weren't even getting paid fairly for. That makes you miserable. Liam felt something crack inside him, some wall he'd been maintaining for 3 years. What do you want from me? The truth. Just once. Who were you before you became the invisible maintenance guy who picks up his kid at 5? For a long moment, Liam didn't speak. Then quietly, someone who built things that changed the world. Someone who was so focused on changing the world that he didn't notice his marriage falling apart until his wife walked out 3 months after our daughter was born. Someone who was offered partnerships and executive positions and chose his daughter instead. Someone like me, Natalie said. Yeah, someone like you. The admission sat between them, raw and honest. Natalie released the emergency stop button and the elevator resumed its descent. For what it's worth, she said as the doors opened on the ground floor, I think you made the right choice, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Liam stepped out of the elevator. I need to go get my daughter. Think about the offer, please. He didn't answer. He just walked away, out of the building, into the cooling evening air. His phone showed 3 more missed calls from weekend daycare. Sophie was probably the only kid left. Again. He drove there rehearsing apologies, trying to figure out how to explain to a 6-year-old why Daddy kept breaking promises. But when he walked in, Sophie wasn't crying or angry. She was sitting in the reading corner with a book about space, and when she saw him, she just stood up and took his hand. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Bug. I'm sorry. It's okay. I knew you'd come. That simple faith, that absolute trust that he would always show up eventually, broke something in Liam that had been straining for days. He picked her up even though she was getting too big for it, held her tight. I love you, Sophie. I love you too. Can we go home now? Yeah, let's go home. Monday morning, Liam submitted his completed inspection documentation to Derek at 7:15 a.m. Every zone checked, every system tested, every problem documented and resolved. The work was perfect because Liam didn't know how to do it any other way. Derek barely glanced at it. This needs to be verified before I can approve it. It's accurate. Check it yourself. That's not how this works. Someone from the fire safety contractor needs to spot check your results. Derek smiled. I've scheduled them for Thursday. Until then, you're not cleared for other assignments. That's 3 days. Yep. Think of it as paid time to catch up on supply inventory. Liam stood there, understanding finally settling in. Derek wasn't just trying to make him fail. He was trying to make him irrelevant, pushing him into corners where his skills didn't matter, where he couldn't prove his value. It was a slow erosion, death by 1,000 procedural cuts. You know what? Liam said. Fine. I'll inventory supplies. He spent Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in the maintenance shop, organizing parts and updating databases. It was mind-numbing work, the kind that made hours feel like days, but it gave him time to think. And what he thought about was Natalie's question. Who was he really? Was he the man who'd designed revolutionary architecture that had changed an industry? Or was he the father who made spaghetti with the good sauce and helped his daughter with fractions? Could he be both? And if he couldn't, which one did he want to be? Thursday morning, the fire safety contractor arrived to verify Liam's inspection work. He was a grizzled man in his 50s named Tom, who looked like he'd been crawling through mechanical spaces since before Liam was born. This your work? Tom asked, scrolling through the documentation on his tablet. Yes, sir. Tom grunted, checked a few random data points against the actual systems, then looked at Liam with something like respect. This is the most thorough inspection report I've seen in 20 years. You find that pressure regulator issue on 12? Yes, sir. Saved lives. That thing would have failed during an emergency. Tom signed off on the verification. You trained in fire suppression systems? Self-taught, mostly. Huh. Well, you're better than half the certified people I work with. If you ever want a different job, look me up. Tom left, and Liam felt a small spark of something he hadn't felt in a while. Pride. The simple satisfaction of knowing he'd done something that mattered, that had value beyond just checking boxes. Derek appeared in the doorway. Inspections approved. Gary's got your next assignment. Great. Don't look so smug, Carter. I'm not done with you. I never thought you were. Liam walked past him to find Gary, who handed him a work order with an apologetic expression. What's this? Derek requested it specifically. There's a persistent network connectivity issue in conference room J on 31. IT's been trying to fix it remotely for a week. They need someone on site to check the physical infrastructure. Liam looked at the work order, at the problem description, and recognized it immediately. This wasn't a physical infrastructure problem. This was a complex network routing issue that would require deep system access to solve, access that a maintenance worker didn't have. Derek had handed him another impossible task, but this time Liam couldn't MacGyver his way through it without revealing exactly what he was. When do they need this fixed? Board meeting tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. 24 hours. Liam could look at the problem, confirm it wasn't hardware, and pass it back to IT. That was the safe play, the invisible play. Or he could actually fix it. He looked at Gary. If I solve this, Derek's going to ask questions. Probably. And if I don't solve it, he'll say I'm not competent enough for my job. Yeah, you're kind of stuck either way. Liam thought about Natalie's words in the elevator. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe it was time to stop choosing between being invisible and being himself. Maybe there was a third option. I'll take care of it, Liam said. He went to conference room J and spent 2 hours diagnosing the issue. As expected, it wasn't hardware. It was a routing table corruption in the network controller that was causing packet loss every time the room tried to connect to the main corporate network. The fix required administrative access to the network management system, which he definitely didn't have. Liam sat there staring at his tablet, at the code he could fix in 90 seconds, if only he had the credentials. Then he pulled out his phone and made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. He called Natalie Voss. She answered on the second ring. Liam, I need a favor. Name it. I need temporary admin access to the network management system, just for an hour. There was a pause. Why? Because I can fix a problem that your IT department can't, but I need the right credentials to do it. If I give you those credentials and you're wrong, it could cause system-wide failures. I'm not wrong. Another pause, longer this time. Then, I'll have IT send you temporary credentials. They'll expire in 2 hours. Thank you. Liam, whatever you're about to do, it's going to make you visible. I know. Are you ready for that? Liam thought about Sophie, about the life he'd built, about 3 years of staying small and safe. Then he thought about Tom, the contractor's respect, about his daughter asking if he was happy, about the man he used to be and the man he wanted to become. Yeah, he said, I think I am. The credentials arrived in his email 17 minutes later. Liam stared at the temporary access code, at the string of characters that would let him into systems he hadn't touched in 3 years, and felt his hands start to shake slightly. Not from nerves, from something closer to recognition, like a runner feeling pavement under their feet after months of sitting still. He connected his tablet to the conference room's network port, entered the credentials, and watched the management interface load. The system architecture spread across his screen in familiar patterns: data flows, routing tables, firewall rules. It was like reading a language he'd once spoken fluently and had forced himself to forget. The problem was exactly where he'd expected it to be: a corrupted routing entry in the primary gateway that was causing packet collisions every time the conference room tried to establish a connection. Someone had pushed a firmware update 2 weeks ago without properly testing the migration path, and now the old routing table and the new one were fighting each other like two people trying to go through the same door at once. Liam's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up the configuration files, identifying the conflicting entries. The fix was elegant in its simplicity. Remove the legacy routes, rebuild the table from scratch, push the update through the proper channels. 3 minutes of work for someone who knew what they were doing. 3 weeks of troubleshooting for someone who didn't. He executed the changes, tested the connection, and watched the network traffic smooth out like water finding its level. The conference room's displays came online immediately. Crystal clear, no lag. Done. Liam sat back, logged out of the management system, and felt the weight of what he'd just done settle over him. He'd fixed it. He'd actually fixed it, using skills that were supposed to belong to someone who didn't exist anymore. And now there would be logs, records, proof that a maintenance worker had accessed enterprise network systems and solved a problem that senior engineers couldn't touch. Derek would see those logs. IT would see them. People would ask questions. Liam packed up his equipment and went to find Gary. The facilities manager was in his office working through a stack of requisition forms with the resigned expression of a man who'd been doing paperwork for too many years. Conference room J is fixed, Liam said. Gary looked up. Already? Network routing issue. Should be stable now. IT's been working on that for a week. I know. Gary set down his pen, studied Liam's face. You want to tell me how a maintenance worker fixed an enterprise network problem? Not really. That's what I thought. Gary sighed, rubbed his temples. Derek's going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Probably. You know he's going to dig, right? He's going to want to know exactly what you did, how you did it, why you have skills that are way beyond your job description. Let him dig. Liam, I'm tired, Gary. I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am. I'm tired of watching my daughter be the last kid at daycare because I'm afraid of being noticed. I'm just tired. Gary was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, but whatever happens next, it's going to happen fast. You just painted a target on your back. I've had a target on my back since Derek decided I was a threat. At least now I'm shooting back. Liam left the office and went back to the maintenance shop. He had 2 hours before he needed to pick up Sophie, and he spent them doing routine work, replacing worn gaskets, organizing tools, checking inventory levels. Normal things, grounding things. The kind of work that reminded him that no matter what storms were coming, he was still just a guy who fixed things and loved his daughter. At 4:47, his radio crackled with Gary's voice, tense and urgent. Carter, I need you on 42 immediately. Liam's stomach dropped. What's wrong? Just get up here. Now. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Liam ran through scenarios in his head, each one worse than the last. Derek had filed a complaint. HR wanted to question him about unauthorized system access. Natalie had changed her mind about protecting him. He was being fired, effective immediately, and would have to explain to Sophie why Daddy didn't have a job anymore. The executive floor was busier than he'd ever seen it. People in suits moved through the corridors with purpose, voices low and worried. Something was wrong, something bigger than one maintenance worker's unauthorized network access. Gary met him at the elevator. Conference room A, CEO wants you there. Gary, what's going on? System failure, building-wide, started 5 minutes ago. They walked quickly down the corridor and Liam could see it now, the subtle signs of technological collapse. Display screens showing error messages, people clustered around laptops with frustrated expressions. Someone from IT running past with a tablet and a look of barely controlled panic. Conference room A was packed. Natalie stood at the head of the table, still in her business attire but with her jacket off and her sleeves rolled up. Around her were 10 or 12 people, senior engineers, IT directors, the CTO whose name Liam couldn't remember. All of them looked stressed. Natalie saw him and relief flashed across her face. Liam, thank you for coming. Derek Morris was there too, standing near the back of the room with his arms crossed, an expression that clearly said this was both not his problem and somehow Liam's fault. What's the situation? Liam asked. The CTO, a thin man in his 50s with wire-frame glasses, turned to look at him. Who's this? Maintenance, Derek said. Why is maintenance here? Because he fixed the conference room J network issue in 3 minutes, when your entire department couldn't solve it in a week, Natalie said sharply. Liam, we're having cascading failures across our primary data infrastructure. Building systems, cloud services, client connections, everything's degrading. When did it start? 4:32 p.m. We've tried rolling back the last 3 system updates, isolating affected segments, even forcing a cache flush. Nothing's working. One of the senior engineers, a woman with short dark hair, pulled up a diagnostic display. We're seeing packet loss across all major routing nodes. It's like the network is slowly strangling itself. Liam looked at the display, at the patterns of failure spreading through the system like cracks in ice, and something clicked in his head, a recognition so immediate it was almost physical. Can I see the system architecture documentation? He asked. Why? Derek demanded. So you can pretend to understand it? Derek, shut up, Natalie said without looking at him. To Liam, we don't have time for full documentation. What do you need? The core routing framework, specifically the load balancing algorithms. The CTO frowned. Why would load balancing cause? Just show me. Someone pulled up the code on the main display. Liam studied it for 30 seconds, and there it was. The flaw he'd been afraid someone would find eventually, buried deep in the original architecture. It was elegant and efficient under normal conditions, but it had one critical weakness. If traffic load hit a specific threshold during a specific type of processing cycle, the algorithm would start making micro-corrections that actually made the problem worse, a feedback loop that would eventually collapse the entire system. He'd put that flaw there himself 5 years ago, when he'd designed the core infrastructure. He'd known about it even then, had flagged it as something to address in the next major revision. But he'd left the company before that revision happened, and nobody else had understood the architecture well enough to find it. Until now, when the company had grown large enough that the threshold had finally been crossed. I know what's wrong, Liam said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him, this maintenance worker in a gray uniform who'd just claimed to understand a problem that had stumped their entire engineering leadership. Then tell us, Natalie said. There's a flaw in the load balancing algorithm. When traffic hits 87.3% of maximum capacity during a high-frequency transaction cycle, the algorithm tries to redistribute load across secondary nodes. But the redistribution calculation includes a variable that references itself in the next iteration. It creates a feedback loop. The CTO stared at him. That's theoretically possible, but it would require someone to have made a very specific mistake in the original architecture. It wasn't a mistake, Liam said. It was a calculated risk. The architect knew about it, flagged it for future correction, but assumed normal growth patterns would never push the system to that threshold. How do you know that? Liam met his eyes. Because I'm the architect. The silence that followed was absolute. Derek Morris looked like someone had just explained quantum physics to him using interpretive dance. The senior engineer stared at Liam with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning comprehension. And Natalie looked at him with something like vindication, like she'd just won a bet with herself. "You're lying," Derek said finally. "The system architect was—" He stopped because he didn't actually know who the original architect was. Nobody did. It had been 5 years ago, before most of these people had even joined the company. "Michael Ross," Liam said quietly. "That was the name on the architecture documents. But Michael Ross doesn't exist. He never did. It was just a name I used because I didn't want the attention that came with putting my real name on revolutionary work." The CTO slowly sat down. Michael Ross designed the most advanced cloud infrastructure framework in the industry. His white papers are still being cited. Companies have spent millions trying to replicate his approach. "You're telling me you're him?" "I'm telling you I wrote the code that's currently failing, and I can fix it, but I need full system access and I need everyone else to stop trying to solve this so they don't make it worse." Natalie didn't hesitate. "Give him access. Everyone else, step back." "Wait," Derek said. "We're just going to let some maintenance worker—" "Derek," Natalie's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "Either sit down and be quiet, or leave. Your choice." Derek sat down, but his face had gone red with anger and humiliation. Liam moved to the main workstation, logged in with the credentials Natalie provided, and pulled up the core routing framework. The code was familiar and foreign at the same time, his original work, but with 3 years of modifications and additions layered on top. It was like looking at a photo of his younger self and seeing a stranger. The feedback loop was already in full swing, and with each passing second it was getting worse. Liam could see the progression. Within 20 minutes, the entire system would be unrecoverable without a full shutdown and rebuild, which would mean days of downtime and millions in losses. He had maybe 10 minutes to fix 5 years of accumulated technical debt. His fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up the load balancing algorithm, finding the self-referential variable that was causing the loop. The fix wasn't simple. He couldn't just remove the variable without breaking a dozen dependent functions. He needed to rewrite the calculation to eliminate the reference while maintaining the load distribution logic. "What are you doing?" one of the engineers asked. "Rewriting the distribution calculation to use a bounded iterator instead of a recursive reference," Liam said, without looking up. "The iterator will cap at the same load threshold but won't create a feedback loop when it hits the ceiling. That'll take hours to code properly. I wrote this system. I know exactly what it needs." Liam coded like he hadn't coded in 3 years, muscle memory taking over, his mind slipping into that focused state where time became fluid, and the only thing that mattered was the logic unfolding across the screen. He could feel the eyes on him, the engineers watching, trying to follow his work. Natalie standing behind him, protective and curious. Derek seething in the corner, but none of it mattered. This was what he'd been, what he'd given up, what part of him had been starving for without admitting it. 7 minutes later, he pushed the updated code to the production environment and watched the system metrics shift. The packet loss started to decrease. The load distribution smoothed out. The feedback loop collapsed, and the network infrastructure stabilized like a patient whose heart had just started beating regularly again. The main display showed system status returning to green across all major nodes. The cascading failure had been stopped with 3 minutes to spare. Someone in the room let out a breath, then another. Then the CTO started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound of relief and disbelief. "He did it. He actually did it." Natalie put a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Liam sat back from the keyboard, and his hands were shaking now, adrenaline and exhaustion hitting him all at once. "Yeah, I'm okay. That was incredible. That was necessary." He checked his watch. 5:04 p.m. His stomach dropped. "I need to go." "Go?" "Daycare. I'm already late." "Liam, you just saved the company from a complete system collapse. You can take 5 minutes." "No, I can't." He stood up, and the room was still watching him, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. "Sophie doesn't care if I save the company. She just wants her dad to pick her up on time." He walked toward the door, and Natalie followed him. "Wait. We need to talk about this." "Later." "People are going to have questions. Let them ask. I'll answer tomorrow. Right now I need to be a father." He left the conference room, left the stunned executives and the system he'd just saved, and ran for the elevator. His mind was already racing ahead. How much would the late fee be? How long would Sophie have been waiting? Would Jenny from the daycare finally follow through on her threat to discuss whether this arrangement was working? The drive to the daycare took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Liam pulled into the parking lot at 5:21 and jogged to the entrance, already pulling out his wallet to pay whatever fee they demanded. But Sophie wasn't in the reading corner. She wasn't anywhere in the main room. "Mr. Carter," Jenny approached him with an expression he couldn't read. "We need to talk." Liam's heart stopped. "Where's Sophie?" "She's fine. She's in the art room with Miss Rachel. But Mr. Carter, this is the 8th time this month you've been late. We've been patient, but I know, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "You said that last week and the week before." Jenny crossed her arms. "Sophie is a wonderful kid, but she's spending too much time being the last child here. It's not fair to her, and it's not fair to our staff who need to maintain pickup schedules." "You're right. I understand. How much is the fee?" "The fee is $25, but that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Jenny's expression softened slightly. "The point is that your daughter deserves consistency. She deserves to know that when we say pickup is at 5 o'clock, someone will be here at 5 o'clock. Can you give her that?" Liam looked at this woman who barely knew him, who was judging his entire worth as a parent based on clock watching and policy compliance, and felt anger surge through him. She had no idea what he'd sacrificed to be here at all. No idea what he'd given up, what he'd walked away from, what he'd just done 20 minutes ago that had saved jobs and prevented chaos, and demonstrated skills that people with graduate degrees couldn't match. But then he thought about Sophie in the art room, probably working on some project to pass the time while she waited. Again. And the anger collapsed into something closer to shame. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I'm really trying. I know you are. But trying isn't enough if the outcome keeps being the same." Jenny pulled out a form. "I need you to sign this acknowledgement that we've discussed the late pickup policy. If there are 3 more late pickups in the next month, we'll have to terminate your enrollment." Liam took the form, signed it without reading it, and paid the fee. Then he went to the art room and found Sophie at a table covered in construction paper and glue, making what looked like a model of the solar system. "Hi, Bug." She looked up, and her face lit up the way it always did, like he was the best thing she'd seen all day despite being 21 minutes late. "Daddy, look! I made Jupiter. It has a red spot and everything." Liam crouched beside her, examined the papier-mâché planet with its carefully painted surface. "That's amazing. You're really good at this." Miss Rachel helped. She said Jupiter is the biggest planet and has lots of storms. Miss Rachel's right. Sophie gathered her project carefully. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, let's go home." They walked to the car together, Sophie chattering about planets and storms and how she wanted to be an astronaut who studied Jupiter up close. Liam listened and responded and tried not to think about the conversation he'd just had, or the signature he'd put on that form, or the fact that he was 3 late pickups away from losing the daycare that made his entire schedule possible. At dinner, leftover spaghetti reheated in the microwave because Liam didn't have the energy to cook, Sophie asked him why he looked tired. "Just a long day at work, Bug." "Did you fix things?" "Yeah, I fixed something pretty big." "Like what?" "Like, imagine if all the computers in the world started talking to each other wrong and nobody could figure out how to make them talk right again." Sophie's eyes widened. "That would be bad." "It would, but I figured out how to fix it." "Because you're smart." "Because I've done it before, a long time ago." "Before you were my daddy?" The question caught him off guard. "I was always your daddy, but before I decided that being your daddy was the most important thing." Handle. Tomorrow he'd start building something new. But today he was just a father driving his daughter home, and that was still the most important thing. That would always be the most important thing. That evening, Liam made dinner while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table, her pencil moving carefully across math problems about fractions. He'd bought chicken on the way home, the good kind, not the frozen stuff, and was making her favorite, breaded cutlets with mashed potatoes and green beans that she'd eat if he put enough butter on them. "Daddy, what's 3/4 plus 1/2? Liam looked over from the stove. What do you think it is? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Try drawing it. Sometimes pictures help. Sophie frowned at her paper, then started sketching circles divided into sections. Liam watched her work through the problem, seeing the moment when understanding clicked and her face lit up. 1 1/4. There you go. See, you didn't need me at all. I did need you. You told me to draw it. Fair point. Liam plated the chicken, added potatoes and butter-drenched green beans. Dinner's ready. They ate together, and Sophie told him about the jellyfish exhibit they were going to see on the field trip, how some jellyfish could glow in the dark, and some were so poisonous they could kill a person in minutes. She said it with the cheerful enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who hadn't yet learned that death was supposed to be scary. That's pretty intense, Liam said. Maya says jellyfish don't have brains. How do they know where to go if they don't have brains? They just drift. The ocean currents move them around. Sophie thought about this while chewing her chicken. That sounds lonely. Maybe. Or maybe they don't know enough to be lonely. I would know. If I was a jellyfish, I would miss you. Liam reached across the table, squeezed her hand. Good thing you're not a jellyfish then. After dinner, they did bath time and story time, 2 chapters tonight because Sophie negotiated hard, and Liam tucked her in with Professor Whiskers and a nightlight that projected stars across her ceiling. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? Are you going to have a different job now? The question surprised him. Maybe. Why? Because you seem different. Not bad different, just different. How so? Sophie scrunched up her face, thinking, like you're less tired. Or maybe you're still tired, but you're not as sad about being tired. The observation was so accurate it hurt. I didn't know I seemed sad. You don't now. That's good. Liam kissed her forehead. Get some sleep. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Bug. He closed her door and stood in the hallway for a moment, Sophie's words echoing in his head. She'd noticed. Of course she'd noticed. Kids always noticed more than adults gave them credit for. He'd thought he was protecting her by staying small, by maintaining the careful stability of their routine. But what he'd actually been doing was showing her a father who was exhausted and trapped and pretending that was normal. Maybe it was time to show her something different. Liam went to his desk, opened his laptop, and started making notes. Not about code or systems, but about what he actually wanted. What a job would look like that let him be both a present father and someone who used his skills. The list was short and specific. No travel, no late nights except genuine emergencies, ability to leave at 5 most days, work that mattered but didn't consume him. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did saving a billion-dollar company in 7 minutes while wearing a maintenance uniform. At 10:30, he tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept turning over the day's events. The board meeting, Derek's barely concealed rage, Natalie's confidence that they could make this work. And underneath it all, a question he'd been avoiding for 3 years. Who was he really? The man who designed revolutionary systems, the father who made chicken cutlets and helped with fractions. Could someone be both without failing at everything? His phone buzzed with an email. Natalie, sent 15 minutes ago. Liam, couldn't sleep either. Been thinking about your situation. I have an idea, but I want to run it by you before tomorrow's meeting. Call me if you're awake. N. Liam stared at the email, then checked the time. 10:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone who wasn't a close friend or family. But she'd said to call, and he was awake. And the alternative was lying in bed running scenarios in his head until dawn. He called. She answered on the first ring. You're awake. Can't shut my brain off, Liam said. What's the idea? Consultant position. Independent contractor, not employee. You set your hours, work from home when possible, come to the office only for critical issues or meetings you choose to attend. We pay you a retainer plus project rates that reflect your actual value. Liam sat up. That's not a standard corporate structure. No, it's not. But you're not a standard situation. The board wants your expertise without losing you to another company. This gives them that while giving you control over your schedule. What about Derek? He's going to argue this is special treatment. Derek is being reassigned to a different department. The board decided his management style doesn't align with our values. Natalie's voice carried an edge of satisfaction. Apparently making false accusations about security threats is frowned upon. He's getting demoted? laterally moved with a strong suggestion that he focus on his own work instead of everyone else's. Same salary, different department, no direct reports. Liam felt a twinge of something that might have been sympathy. He's going to be furious. He should have thought about that before he tried to destroy someone's career out of spite. Natalie paused. Look, I know this doesn't solve everything. You'll still have to figure out boundaries, what work you're willing to take on, how to balance everything. But it gives you options. That's more than you had yesterday. Why are you doing this? What do you mean? Fighting for me? Restructuring positions? Going against board expectations? Why? Natalie was quiet for a moment. Because I've spent the last 4 years building this company, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing everything for success. And then I met you, someone who walked away from everything I'm chasing because he realized it wasn't worth the cost. That's either the stupidest decision I've ever heard or the wisest. And I'm starting to think it's the wisest. Natalie, I don't have kids. Don't have a partner. Don't have anything outside this company. I tell myself that's fine, that success is enough. But watching you choose your daughter over everything else, watching you refuse to compromise on what matters to you, it makes me wonder what I'm actually building here. Is it worth it if I end up alone at the top? I can't answer that for you. I know, but maybe having someone around who made a different choice will help me figure it out. She cleared her throat, her voice becoming more businesslike. Anyway, think about the consultant position. We'll discuss details tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the contract. Liam hung up and lay back down, staring at the ceiling. A consultant position. His own hours. Control over what work he took. It sounded good. Almost too good, which made him suspicious. There would be catches, complications, moments where the company needed him, and he had to choose between their crisis and Sophie's school play. But at least he'd have the choice. That was something. He fell asleep thinking about Sophie's observation that he seemed less sad, and woke up at 5:45 with sunlight coming through his window and a sense that today might actually be okay. Morning routine went smoothly for once. Sophie got dressed without arguing, ate her breakfast without needing 3 reminders, and was ready to go by 7:05. They drove to school together, and she kissed his cheek before running off to join her friends. Have a good day, Bug. You too, Daddy. Liam watched her go, this small person who was both completely dependent on him and entirely her own individual, and felt a surge of determination. Whatever happened today, whatever changes came, he'd make sure she was okay. That was the baseline. Everything else was negotiable. He drove to Quantum Dynamics, parked in his usual spot, and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. Natalie's assistant waved him through immediately, and he found Natalie at her desk with coffee and a stack of documents. Right on time, she said. Want coffee? Already had 3 cups. Nervous? Trying to figure out if this is real or if I'm going to wake up still working in the basement. Natalie smiled. It's real. Sit down. Let's talk details. For the next hour, they worked through the consultant agreement. The retainer was more than Liam had made in a year as maintenance. The project rates were, frankly, absurd. The terms gave him full control over his schedule with a requirement to be available for genuine emergencies, defined as system failures that threatened company operations, not routine problems that could wait. This is too much, Liam said, looking at the numbers. It's market rate for someone with your expertise. Actually, it's below market rate. I could hire you for twice this at another company. I don't want twice this. I want enough to be comfortable and time to raise my daughter. Then you're negotiating against yourself, which is a first in my experience. Natalie leaned back. Liam, you saved this company millions. You're worth every cent of this contract. Take it or I'll be offended. That's not how negotiations work. I'm the CEO. I decide how negotiations work. Liam looked at the contract again, at terms that would change everything. No more late fees. No more anxiety about Sophie's field trip costs. No more choosing between fixing the car and buying groceries. Just stability, flexibility, and the freedom to actually be good at both jobs, father and engineer. What about the board, he asked. They agreed to this? Unanimously. Even Marcus, who's usually the most conservative about non-standard arrangements, you made an impression. By being desperate and honest. By being human. That's rarer than you'd think in corporate America. Natalie pushed a pen across the desk. Sign it, please, before I come to my senses. Liam signed. His hand shook slightly as he wrote his name, his real name, not a pseudonym, not a half-truth, and watched Natalie countersign as witness. Congratulations, she said. You're officially a consultant for quantum dynamics. I have no idea how to be a consultant. You'll figure it out. You figured out everything else. They spent another 30 minutes discussing logistics, setting up a home office, equipment needs, which projects would be good fits for his skills. Then Natalie's assistant knocked and entered with an apologetic expression. Ms. Voss, Marcus Thornton is here. He says it's urgent. Natalie frowned. We don't have a meeting scheduled. He knows. He said it concerns Dr. Carter. Liam felt his stomach drop. That doesn't sound good. Marcus entered a moment later, and his expression was grim. He carried a folder that he set on Natalie's desk with deliberate care. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Natalie asked. Derek Morris filed a formal complaint with the SEC this morning. He's alleging that Quantum Dynamics knowingly employed someone under false identity for purposes of corporate espionage, and that the board was complicit in covering it up. The room went silent. Liam felt cold wash over him. That's insane, Natalie said. We discussed this yesterday. The board cleared him. The board cleared him. Derek disagrees with that decision and has taken it to external authorities. Marcus looked at Liam. I'm sorry, Dr. Carter. This is going to require investigation, interviews, probably legal depositions. It's going to be messy. What does that mean for the consultant contract? Natalie asked. It means we need to pause implementation until this is resolved. Having Dr. Carter in an official capacity while under investigation would look like we're rewarding potential wrongdoing. There was no wrongdoing, Chupa. I believe that. You believe that. But the SEC doesn't care what we believe. They care about following procedure. Marcus looked genuinely apologetic. Liam, you're not in trouble, but we need to let the investigation run its course before we can move forward. Liam stood up slowly. How long will that take? Months, probably. Maybe longer if Derek is determined to push it. Months. Liam felt everything he'd just gained slipping away. The consultant position, the stability, the chance to be both things at once. All of it suspended in bureaucratic limbo while Derek tried to prove a conspiracy that didn't exist. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? We'll keep you on as maintenance at your current salary, Marcus said. Full pay, full benefits, until this is resolved. So I'm back to being invisible, temporarily. Right, temporarily. Liam picked up the unsigned consultant contract, looked at it for a moment, then set it down. Is there anything else? Just my apology. This shouldn't be happening. Derek is abusing the system because you embarrassed him, but we have to let it play out. Liam walked to the door, then stopped. Can I ask you something, Marcus? Of course. If I'd stayed invisible, if I'd never fixed that system failure, would Derek have left me alone? Marcus considered the question. Probably. Then I made the wrong choice. No. The word was firm, absolute. You made the brave choice. There's a difference. Liam left without responding. He took the elevator down to the basement, went to the maintenance shop, and sat at the workbench staring at tools he'd organized 100 times. Gary found him there 20 minutes later. Heard about Derek's complaint. News travels fast. Building this size, everything travels fast. Gary sat on the stool across from him. For what it's worth, everyone thinks he's full of shit. Everyone except the SEC. They'll figure it out. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, but in the meantime, I'm stuck. Liam picked up a screwdriver, turned it over in his hands. I had it, Gary. I had the chance to be something more and still be there for Sophie. And now it's gone because Derek couldn't handle being wrong. It's not gone. It's delayed. That's different. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like the universe is telling me to stay in my lane. Gary was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? I think the universe is testing whether you actually meant what you said about not hiding anymore. It's easy to be brave when things work out immediately. Harder to stay brave when it gets messy. That's a terrible philosophy. Probably, but it's kept me employed for 30 years, so what do I know? Gary stood up. Conference room on 12 has a projector issue. Want something to do while you wait for the bureaucrats to catch up? Liam looked at him, at this man who'd never judged him for being overqualified or underutilized, who'd just offered him dignity in the form of honest work. Yeah, I'll take it. The projector issue was simple. Loose cable connection. Liam fixed it in 10 minutes, then moved on to a thermostat calibration on floor 8, then a flickering light in the parking garage. Normal work. Maintenance work. The kind of thing he'd been doing for 3 years. But it felt different now. Not because the work had changed, but because he had. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was just doing his job while other things got sorted out. That was a different thing entirely. At 4:45, he was finishing a water pressure check in a third-floor bathroom when his phone rang. Unknown number again. Hello? Mr. Carter? This is Diana Reeves. I'm the attorney representing quantum dynamics in the SEC investigation. Liam's chest tightened. Okay. I wanted to reach out personally to explain what's happening and what you can expect. Do you have a few minutes? I'm at work, but yeah, I can talk. Great. So here's the situation. The SEC is required to investigate any formal complaint that alleges corporate wrongdoing. Derek Morris's complaint makes specific claims about identity fraud and corporate espionage. Those are serious allegations, which means the SEC has to look into them even if they seem baseless. How long will that take? 3 to 6 months for initial investigation. If they find cause to dig deeper, longer. But, Mr. Carter, I want to be clear about something. We've already provided the SEC with documentation showing that you changed your name legally, that you passed all required background checks, and that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. This is going to end with them finding nothing, because there's nothing to find. Then why do we have to wait months? Because bureaucracy. Because Derek filed the complaint in a way that requires thorough investigation. And honestly, because the SEC doesn't want to be accused of giving preferential treatment to a major corporation. They're going to do this by the book to cover their own liability. Liam leaned against the bathroom counter. So I'm stuck in limbo. Unfortunately, yes. But not forever. And in the meantime, Quantum Dynamics is covering all your legal fees, maintaining your employment, and has made it clear they want to move forward with the consultant position the moment this clears. Assuming it clears. It will clear. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know the difference between a real case and a vindictive complaint from someone with an axe to grind. This is the latter. Thanks, I think. Hang in there, Mr. Carter. Justice is slow, but it's not blind. Liam ended the call and checked his watch. 4:52. He cleaned up his tools, put the bathroom back in order, and headed for the exit. The drive to Sophie's school took 18 minutes, and he made it to the pickup line with 3 minutes to spare. Sophie climbed into the car with her backpack and a paper bag that smelled like cafeteria pizza. They gave us extra pizza for snack time, and I saved mine for you. That's very thoughtful, Bug. Thank you. It's cold now, but it's still good. Cold pizza is like regular pizza's cousin. Liam smiled despite everything. Pizza's cousin. I like that. They drove home and Sophie told him about her day. They'd practiced for the field trip, learned about ocean ecosystems, and her friend Maya had gotten in trouble for talking during quiet time. Normal 6-year-old life, uncomplicated by SEC investigations or legal limbo or fathers who couldn't figure out how to be both present and fulfilled. At home, Liam heated up the cold pizza. It was actually better than he expected, and they ate together while Sophie drew pictures of jellyfish with too many tentacles. After dinner, she wanted to play cards, so they played her favorite game where the rules changed every round, and Liam never quite knew if he was winning or losing. Daddy, you're distracted. Sorry, Bug. What? I asked if you want to trade your blue card for my green card. Why would I want to trade? Because I said so. That's the new rule. You can't just make up rules in the middle of the game. I'm 6. I can do whatever I want. Liam laughed, and it felt good. Fair point. Okay, I'll trade. They played until 8:15, then did the bedtime routine. Bath, teeth, story, tucking in. Sophie was almost asleep when she asked him one more question. Daddy, are you sad about work? Liam sat on the edge of her bed. Why do you ask? Because you had that voice, the one you use when you're trying not to be worried. He'd underestimated her again. Something happened today that's going to make things complicated for a while, but it'll be okay. Is it because you fixed the important thing? Sort of, yeah. Sophie thought about this. Maybe some people don't like it when you're good at fixing things. That's pretty much exactly it, Bug. That's dumb. Being good at things is good. You'd think so. Sophie hugged Professor Whiskers closer. I still think you should do what you're good at, even if some people are dumb about it. Liam kissed her forehead. When did you get so wise? I was born this way. Right, my mistake. He turned off her light, closed the door to a crack, and stood in the hallway feeling like his 6-year-old daughter had just given him better life advice than most adults could manage. She was right. Being good at things was good. And if some people couldn't handle that, that was their problem. The question was whether Liam was willing to wait months for bureaucracy to catch up with that reality. Over the next 3 weeks, life settled into a strange new normal. Liam worked maintenance during the day, picking up shifts and fixing problems with the same efficiency he always had. But now people knew who he was. Engineers nodded to him in the hallways. Executives stopped to ask his opinion on technical issues. Even the receptionist on the 42nd floor greeted him by name. He was visible now, whether he liked it or not. Derek avoided him entirely. Liam heard through Gary that he'd been moved to a different building, working on back-end systems that kept him away from people. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad. Derek had destroyed his own career because he couldn't handle being outperformed by someone he'd dismissed. Natalie checked in twice a week, keeping him updated on the investigation. The SEC was being thorough but not aggressive. They'd interviewed Liam once, asked straightforward questions, seemed satisfied with straightforward answers. The attorney was confident it would clear within 2 months. Sophie started the extended hours program at daycare, which meant Liam had breathing room 3 days a week. On those days, he picked her up at 5:45, and the relief of not rushing, not calculating minutes, not worrying about late fees made him realize how much stress he'd been carrying for 3 years. On a Tuesday in the 4th week, Liam was recalibrating sensors in a server room when his phone buzzed with a call from Natalie. Can you come up to 42? Something you should see. What is it? Just come up, trust me. Liam found her in her office with her laptop open, and her expression was somewhere between amused and impressed. Look at this. She turned the screen toward him. It was a forum post on a major tech industry site. The thread title read, "The Mystery of Michael Ross. Does anyone know who he really is?" Liam's stomach dropped. Oh no. Oh yes. Apparently someone connected the dots between the Michael Ross white papers and yesterday's system save at Quantum Dynamics. Now half the tech world is trying to figure out who you are. Liam read through the thread. People were analyzing his coding style, comparing his architectural decisions, speculating about which company he was working for and under what name. Some of the guesses were close, others were wildly wrong. This is bad. This is inevitable. You can't save a major company from collapse and expect to stay anonymous. Natalie closed the laptop. But here's the thing. Nobody's figured it out yet. They know Michael Ross did the work, but they don't know Michael Ross is Liam Carter. So you still have a choice. What choice? You could stay quiet, let the investigation clear, take the consultant position under your real name, but keep the Michael Ross connection private, stay semi-invisible. Or, she paused, you could own it. Publish a blog post, do an interview, explain why you walked away and why you came back. Control the narrative instead of letting speculation control it. That would make me very visible. Yes. People would want things from me. Interviews, consulting offers, speaking engagements. Probably. I can't do that, Sophie. Sophie has a father who's trying to figure out how to be authentic while still being present. That's worth something. Natalie leaned forward. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying you have more options than you think. You don't have to choose between being invisible or being consumed. There's middle ground. Liam looked at the forum thread again, at people trying to solve the mystery of who he was. What would you do? Me? I'd own it, but I don't have a 6-year-old, and my priorities are different from yours. Natalie smiled slightly. Although watching you prioritize your daughter over everything else is making me reconsider whether my priorities are actually right. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking about why I work 80 hours a week. what I'm actually trying to prove, who I'm trying to impress. She shook her head. I don't have answers yet, but I'm starting to ask better questions. Liam left her office thinking about visibility and choice and what kind of example he was setting for Sophie. Gary was right. She learned from watching him. And lately what she'd been watching was a father who finally stopped pretending to be less than he was. Maybe it was time to take that lesson further. That evening after dinner, Liam sat Sophie down at the kitchen table. Bug, I need to talk to you about something. She looked up from her homework with immediate concern. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. Liam pulled out a chair, sat across from her. You know how Daddy fixes things at work? The important things. Right. Well, some people want to know more about how Daddy learned to fix those things. They might want to interview me or write articles about me or ask me to talk at conferences. Sophie's eyes went wide. Are you famous? Not famous, just known in a specific way to specific people. Is that good? I don't know yet. It might mean more attention, more questions, maybe some changes, but it also might mean I get to do work that matters while still being here for you. I wanted to know what you think about that. Sophie was quiet for a moment, her pencil tapping against her math worksheet. Will you still pick me up from school? Yes. Will you still make spaghetti with the good sauce? Of course. Will you still help me with fractions? Always. Then I think it's good. Because you should do what makes you happy, as long as you're still my daddy, too. Liam felt his throat tighten. I'm always going to be your daddy. That's the most important thing. I know. Sophie went back to her homework like they'd just discussed something completely ordinary, and maybe for her it was. Maybe 6-year-olds understood better than adults that people could be multiple things at once without breaking. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Liam opened his laptop and started writing. Not code this time. Words. An explanation, a story, an honest account of who he'd been and who he'd chosen to become. He wrote about brilliant and broken, about choosing his daughter over his career, about 3 years of hiding and the moment when hiding became more costly than being seen. He wrote for 2 hours, edited for another hour, and finally hit publish on a blog post titled Why I Disappeared and Why I'm Not Hiding Anymore. Within 12 hours, it had been shared 8,000 times. By the end of the week, major tech publications were reaching out for interviews. The SEC investigation wrapped up faster than expected. Apparently, Liam's public statement eliminated any question about his motives. Derek's complaint was officially dismissed as baseless. Marcus called Liam personally to say the consultant contract was ready whenever he wanted to sign it. Take your time, Marcus said. You've been through a lot. Make sure this is what you want. It is. But I need to set some boundaries first. Such as? No conferences that require overnight travel until Sophie's older. No interviews during school hours. And no pretending I'm always available. If there's a genuine emergency, I'll be there. But I get to define genuine emergency based on whether it can wait until tomorrow. Marcus laughed. You're negotiating with the board chairman. I'm negotiating with myself. You just happen to be listening. Fair enough. Send me your terms. We'll make it work. Liam sent the terms. The board approved them without changes. 2 days later, he signed the consultant contract in Natalie's office, with Gary as a witness because it felt right to have him there. Congratulations, Natalie said. How does it feel to officially not be invisible? Terrifying, but good terrifying, not bad terrifying. There's a difference? Yeah. Bad terrifying is when you're afraid of something happening. Good terrifying is when you're afraid, but you're doing it anyway because it matters. Natalie smiled. I like that distinction. Mind if I steal it? Be my guest. The next few months were an adjustment. Liam set up a home office in the corner of his bedroom. Nothing fancy, just a desk and a good chair and a monitor that didn't give him a headache. He worked from home 3 days a week, went into the office for critical issues and meetings he couldn't skip. The consulting fees were deposited monthly, and for the first time in 3 years, Liam didn't check his bank account with anxiety. Sophie adjusted faster than he did. She liked having him home more, liked that he was available for school pickups without rushing, liked that he seemed less tired and more present. She bragged to her friends that her daddy was a computer genius, which was embarrassing but also kind of sweet. Natalie started asking Liam for advice on things beyond technical systems. how to set boundaries, how to figure out what actually mattered versus what just seemed urgent, how to build a life that included work but wasn't consumed by it. "You're not a therapist," she said one afternoon over coffee in her office. "Definitely not. But you figured something out that I'm still working on. How to be successful without sacrificing everything else." "I didn't figure it out. I just hit a breaking point and made a different choice." "Maybe that's the same thing." They had coffee once a week after that, sometimes talking about work, sometimes talking about life. Liam learned that Natalie was 36, had built quantum dynamics from almost nothing, and was starting to wonder if building empires was worth doing alone. She learned that Liam had once been so obsessed with his research that he'd missed his own anniversary, that his ex-wife had left him a note instead of having a conversation because she knew he'd just try to fix it with logic. "That's heartbreaking," Natalie said. "It was necessary. I needed to break before I could build something better." "Is this better?" "Yeah, it actually is." 6 months after the SEC investigation closed, Liam was doing bedtime routine with Sophie when she asked him a question that stopped him cold. "Daddy, do you have a girlfriend?" Liam looked up from the book they were reading. "What? No. Why?" "Because Maya's mom says you should. She says you're a catch." "Maya's mom said that?" "At pickup yesterday. I heard her talking to Katie's mom. They said you're smart and nice and good with kids and you should be dating." Liam felt his face heat up. "That's not really how it works, Bug." "Why not?" "Because I'm busy being your dad." "You could be both. You're good at being both things now." The observation was so casual and so accurate that Liam didn't know how to respond. Sophie went back to the book like she hadn't just upended his entire perspective on his life. That night after she was asleep, Liam thought about the question. Did he want to date? Did he want to risk letting someone into the careful life he'd built with Sophie? The idea seemed complicated and scary and exhausting. But so had leaving his career, so had stopping hiding, so had signing that consultant contract. And all of those had turned out better than he'd feared. The following Tuesday, Liam was working from home when Natalie called. "I need your help with something. Can you come to the office tomorrow around 2? "What's the issue?" "Not a system issue, a people issue. I'm reorganizing the leadership structure, and I want your perspective on how to do it without destroying morale." "I'm not a management consultant." "No, but you understand people better than most actual management consultants. Please?" Liam checked his calendar. Sophie had extended hours tomorrow. "Okay, 2 o'clock. The next day he drove to Quantum Dynamics, signed in at the executive floor, and found Natalie in a conference room with architectural diagrams spread across the table. Except they weren't building diagrams. They were organizational charts. "You really are reorganizing," Liam said. "Trying to. The current structure is efficient, but it burns people out. I want something that allows flexibility without sacrificing productivity." She gestured to the charts. "Tell me what I'm missing." They spent 2 hours discussing different approaches, testing scenarios, identifying weak points. Natalie was brilliant at strategic thinking, but sometimes missed the human element, the fact that people had lives outside work, that flexibility mattered more than optimization, that loyalty came from being treated like a person instead of a resource. "You're describing the structure I wish I'd had 5 years ago," Liam said. "That's kind of the point. I'm trying to build something that doesn't require people to choose between being excellent at work and having an actual life." "Why?" Natalie set down the chart she'd been holding. "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because I look around and realize I've built this incredible company and I have nobody to share it with. Because I met someone who walked away from everything I'm chasing and I can't stop thinking about whether he made the better choice." The room went very quiet. Liam looked at her, at this woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions and was admitting to loneliness with the same directness she used for business negotiations. "Are you talking about me?" "Who else would I be talking about?" "Natalie, I know. You've got Sophie and your life is complicated, and the last thing you need is your former CEO making things weird. But I've been thinking about this for months, and I can't not say it anymore." She met his eyes directly. "You fascinate me, Liam. Not because you're brilliant. I work with brilliant people every day. Because you're brave in ways I'm not. You chose people over success. You admitted you were wrong and changed everything. You let yourself be vulnerable and imperfect and still showed up every day. That's attractive in a way that has nothing to do with credentials or status. Liam didn't know what to say. I'm a mess. My life is complicated. I have a 6-year-old who comes first in every decision I make. I know, that's part of what makes you interesting. I can't offer you what most people want in a relationship. I can't do fancy dinners or weekend getaways or spontaneous anything. My entire life is structured around school schedules and bedtime routines. I'm not most people, and I'm not asking for marriage or some grand commitment. I'm asking if you'd be interested in seeing if there's something here worth exploring. Slowly, carefully, with full acknowledgement that Sophie comes first and always will. Liam looked at her, at this woman who'd fought for him when he was invisible, who'd restructured company policy to give him options, who was now sitting across from him admitting she was lonely and scared and willing to try anyway. And he thought about Sophie asking if he had a girlfriend, about being good at being both things, about the fact that maybe the lesson he was supposed to be learning wasn't about work-life balance, but about letting people in. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together. What if it doesn't work? Then it doesn't work, but what if it does? Liam thought about it, thought about being brave in new ways, about showing Sophie that opening your life to people could be good even when it was scary, about the possibility that maybe he could have more than just work and fatherhood. Okay, he said, let's try. They started carefully. Coffee once a week became coffee twice a week. Eventually, Natalie met Sophie, who interrogated her about whether she liked jellyfish and could do math and what her favorite pizza toppings were. Natalie passed the interrogation, barely, and Sophie declared her pretty cool for a grown-up. Liam introduced Natalie as his friend, which was true even if it wasn't the complete truth. They went to the aquarium together for Sophie's field trip. Natalie had volunteered as a chaperone, which made Sophie suspicious but pleased, and watched jellyfish drift through illuminated tanks while Sophie explained in detail which ones were poisonous and which ones just looked scary. This is nice, Natalie said quietly, while Sophie was distracted by a giant Pacific octopus. Yeah, it is. I've never done this before, the family thing. You're doing fine. Sophie scares me more than any board meeting I've ever run. Liam laughed. She's 6. She's supposed to be scary. That's not reassuring. They watched Sophie press her face against the glass, utterly absorbed in sea creatures that didn't have brains but knew exactly where they were going anyway. And Liam felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty, because he'd learned that certainty was a lie people told themselves, but something close to contentment, something that felt like maybe he'd finally figured out how to be multiple things at once without breaking. A month later, the tech conference where Liam was supposed to give his first public talk sent him the final schedule. He was slotted between 2 prominent researchers, speaking about architectural decisions and why sometimes the brave choice was walking away. I'm nervous, he told Natalie the night before. You've presented at conferences before. That was different. That was before I learned that being brilliant doesn't matter if you're alone. You're not alone now. No, I'm not. The talk went well. People asked smart questions, challenged his decisions, wanted to know more about his architectural approach and his life philosophy in equal measure. Afterward, 3 companies tried to recruit him. He turned them all down politely, explaining that he'd already found the right balance and wasn't interested in disrupting it. One executive asked him how he'd learned to say no to opportunities. I had a daughter who taught me what actually mattered, Liam said. Everything else follows from that. 6 months after he and Natalie started dating, she showed up at his apartment with takeout and a question that made his heart speed up. What if I moved in? Liam looked up from helping Sophie with her homework. What? Not immediately, not tomorrow, but eventually. What if we tried actually building something together instead of just carefully scheduling coffee dates around your life? Sophie perked up. You want to live with us? If your dad says it's okay, and if you say it's okay. Sophie looked at Liam, at Natalie, then back at her homework. Can I think about it? Of course, Natalie said. That night after bedtime, Sophie appeared in Liam's doorway in her pajamas. I thought about it. And? I think Natalie should live with us, but she has to like Professor Whiskers and she can't change the spaghetti sauce. Those seem like reasonable conditions, and she has to know that you're my daddy first. Always, Bug. That never changes. Okay? Then it's okay. Sophie went back to bed, and Liam sat there marveling at how 6-year-olds could make complicated decisions seem simple. A year ago, he would have said no immediately, would have protected the careful structure of their lives against any change. But he'd learned that walls built to keep you safe could also keep you trapped. Natalie moved in 3 months later. It wasn't perfect. She had to learn that Saturday mornings were for pancakes and cartoons, that Sunday evenings were for meal prep, that bedtime routine was sacred and non-negotiable. She adjusted her work schedule, learned to leave the office by 6, discovered that board meetings could happen over video call instead of requiring her physical presence. Sophie taught Natalie how to play her card game with the ever-changing rules. Natalie taught Sophie about business strategy in terms simple enough for a 6-year-old to understand. Liam watched them together and felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever when his marriage fell apart. The sense that family could be chosen, built, created from people who decided to show up for each other. A year after Liam signed the consultant contract, Marcus called him with a proposal. We want to create a technical fellowship program. Bring in brilliant people who don't fit traditional corporate structures. Give them flexibility and resources. Let them solve interesting problems on their own terms. We want you to lead it. That sounds like a job that requires more than flexible hours. It requires someone who understands that brilliance comes in different packages and that the best work happens when people are actually supported instead of just exploited. That's you. Liam thought about it. Thought about the engineers he'd met who were burning out, the talented people who left the industry because it demanded everything, the next generation of Liams who were facing the same impossible choice he'd faced 5 years ago. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Of course you do. The fellowship has to include childcare support, flexible scheduling, and a clear policy that family emergencies are non-negotiable. And I need to be home by 6 every day unless there's a genuine crisis. Done. Write up the proposal. We'll make it happen. Liam wrote the proposal. The board approved it. 6 months later, the Quantum Dynamics Technical Fellowship launched with its first cohort of 5 brilliant people who didn't fit traditional corporate boxes. One was a single mother with 2 kids. One had a chronic illness that required flexible hours. One was caring for an elderly parent. All of them were exceptional at what they did and had been told repeatedly that their circumstances made them unemployable at high levels. Liam hired them all. 2 years after Liam stopped hiding, Sophie turned 8. They celebrated with a party in the park. Her friends from school, Katie and Maya, and a half-dozen other kids running around playing tag while parents stood in clusters making small talk. Natalie helped set up, directing activities with the same organizational precision she brought to board meetings. Gary showed up with his wife, bringing a cake he'd made himself that was lopsided but delicious. Liam watched Sophie blow out her candles, surrounded by friends and family and the life they'd built together, and felt something close to peace. Not the absence of struggle. There were still hard days, still conflicts between work and home, still moments when he questioned whether he was doing enough. But the struggles were honest now. He wasn't hiding or pretending or trying to be smaller than he was. Sophie made a wish and blew out all 8 candles in one breath. The kids cheered. Natalie squeezed Liam's hand. "What do you think she wished for?" she asked. "Probably a puppy. She's been campaigning for months." "Are you going to get her one?" "Absolutely not. I have enough chaos in my life." Natalie laughed. Says the man who rebuilt his entire career, started dating his former CEO, and launched a fellowship program that's already being called revolutionary. That's different. Those were calculated risks. And a puppy isn't? A puppy is a decade-long commitment that sheds and needs walking and will eat my furniture. So is everything else worth having? Liam looked at her, at this woman who'd taken a chance on him when he was invisible, who'd restructured her own life to make room for his complications, who loved his daughter and challenged him and made him want to be better. And he thought about the past 2 years, about Derek's complaint that had almost destroyed everything, about the SEC investigation that had felt like the universe telling him to stay small, about the moment when he decided to stop hiding anyway. Being visible was terrifying. Being authentic was exhausting. Building a life that honored all the parts of himself instead of just the safe parts required constant negotiation and compromise and choice. But it was worth it. Every hard conversation, every difficult decision, every moment of uncertainty and fear. because the alternative was staying small forever, teaching Sophie that safety meant hiding, accepting that being good at things meant being alone. And he'd learned something in these 2 years. People weren't meant to be one thing. They were meant to be complicated, messy, multiple things at once. Fathers and engineers, leaders and caregivers, brilliant and broken, and brave enough to try anyway. Sophie ran over with frosting on her face and pure joy in her eyes. "Daddy, can we play capture the flag?" "Absolutely, Natalie, you're on my team." "I don't know the rules. Neither does anyone else. That's what makes it fun." They played until the sun started setting, kids and adults running through the park in a chaotic game where the rules changed every 5 minutes and nobody kept score. Sophie was fearless, darting between trees, laughing when she got caught, immediately plotting her next escape. Later, after the party wound down and the guests went home, the three of them walked back to the car together, Sophie between them, holding both their hands, talking about how this was the best birthday ever, and could they do it again next year, but maybe with a puppy. "We'll see," Liam said, which was dad speak for probably not, but I don't want to ruin your birthday by saying no. "That means yes," Sophie said confidently. "That means we'll discuss it." "Which means yes," Natalie laughed. "She's got you figured out." "She's 8. She's had 8 years to study me." They loaded the car, drove home through evening traffic, and Liam thought about the path that had brought him here. 5 years ago, he'd been someone else. Someone brilliant and broken. Someone who'd lost everything because he couldn't see past his own ambition. 3 years ago, he'd reinvented himself as someone small and invisible, thinking that hiding was the same as safety. Now he was something else entirely. A father who was present, an engineer who was respected, a partner who was learning to trust, a leader who was changing systems. None of it was perfect. All of it was real. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat before they got home, her head tilted against the window, completely exhausted from the best day ever. Liam carried her inside, tucked her into bed with Professor Whiskers, and stood in her doorway watching her breathe the way he'd done 1,000 times. "You're a good father," Natalie said softly behind him. "I'm trying." "That's what makes you good. You keep trying even when it's hard." Liam closed Sophie's door, took Natalie's hand, and they walked to the living room together. The apartment was bigger now. They'd moved 6 months ago to a place with 3 bedrooms and actual closet space, but it still had Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator, still had the comfortable clutter of real life instead of the sterile perfection of a showroom. "You ever regret it?" Liam asked. "Choosing this instead of the 80-hour work weeks and the corner office glory?" "Every Tuesday around 3 p.m. when I'm helping Sophie with homework instead of closing deals." "Really?" "No, not even a little." Natalie leaned against him. "I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying it's right. There's a difference." "Yeah, there is." They stood there in the quiet apartment, 2 people who'd spent years chasing different versions of success, before realizing that maybe success was just showing up for the people who mattered, being honest about who you were, and building something real instead of something perfect. Outside, the city hummed with life, millions of people making choices, chasing dreams, trying to figure out how to be multiple things at once without breaking. And inside, in a small apartment in a decent neighborhood, a father and his partner stood together while an 8-year-old girl slept soundly, dreaming of jellyfish and puppies and birthdays that lasted forever. It wasn't the life Liam had planned. It wasn't the success he'd imagined when he was 24 and brilliant and convinced that genius was enough. But it was the life he'd chosen, the life he'd fought for, the life he'd stopped hiding to create. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was exactly what he needed it to be.